I built the same exact application using Supabase and Firebase, and these are my thoughts on the two. I'm making this video so that you can learn about the pros and cons of using Supabase versus Firebase, so that in the end you can decide which technology you want to use for your next project. Fun fact, the app that I actually built is my new startup idea, and in the end I'm going to tell you which one I decided to move forward with. For those of you that are looking for my opinion on a particular topic, here is a list of timestamps of everything that I'm going over. First up is, what app am I building? The app that I'm building is called Linkful. It's a better way for content creators to do affiliate marketing. There's a pretty good chance that you've run into this situation before where you're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, and you see a certain video talking about a product, and at the end they say, if you want to buy this product, you can go to the link in my bio. But then you go to the link in their bio and they have 100 other links, or they direct you to their Amazon storefront, and then they have 100 links on their Amazon storefront, and it's really hard to find that item that you saw in that video and to purchase it. Linkful creates a personalized search engine for each content creator, so then the viewer can copy the link to the video that they just watched, paste it into the Linkful site, and then the Linkful website automatically returns the exact item that they were talking about in the video. And now with Linkful, you never have to scroll through hundreds of different links on Linktree, or you don't have to scroll through hundreds of different links on their Amazon. So that's the app. Now let's cover the actual technical topic. So for those of you that don't know, Firebase and Supabase are basically at its core a backend as a service platform, so you don't have to manage your own servers. It scales up automatically for you. It's a little unfair to directly compare Firebase and Supabase because Firebase is a much older product and Firebase has a lot more product offerings compared to Supabase. But let's go over the features that both Firebase and Supabase have in common and see how they stack up to each other. So number one is authentication. Firebase authentication and Supabase authentication are very similar because they are really easy to use. You're able to implement authentication super easily with both platforms, and honestly, I find them to be pretty similar. They both have really intuitive user interfaces to handle the authentication. Overall, the developer experience of implementing authentication on Firebase and Supabase are very similar. I can't think of any simpler way to implement authentication between the two. They both get 1 point for authentication. Number two is databases, and these are where things start to get pretty different. I'm primarily going to be talking about Firestore, which is Firebase's premier database offering, and what makes Firestore unique is that it is a real-time database and it is built on a NoSQL database. It is proprietary specifically to Firebase itself, whereas Supabase actually builds their database off of Postgres, which is an open source platform, and that's going to be the biggest difference between using Firebase versus Supabase. Supabase is built on completely open source technology, so you never have to worry about getting vendor lock-in, whereas Firestore and Firebase is going to force you to do a lot more vendor lock-in because the database that they're using is proprietary to it. Depending on what type of application you are building, sometimes a relational database is going to be more advantageous compared to using a non-relational database like Firestore. So that's something to consider when you are building your next application. Both Firebase and Supabase offer security rules, but the way that they offer these security rules is very different. Supabase security rules are written completely in SQL, so for those of you that are very proficient in SQL, it's going to be really simple for you to write these security. Firebase does not use SQL and actually just uses its own syntax, which is decently intuitive, but I do think that as you get into more complicated use cases, the Firebase security rules are going to be harder to write. So in the end, they both offer very similar features, but just the way that they implement them is different. I am going to give the advantage in this case to Supabase though, because everything is written in SQL, from the authentication rules to how the database is actually set up. Number two is cloud storage. Both offer cloud storage, and it's very simple to use and very easy to set up. You just create a bucket, add some security rules to it, and then you can start uploading whatever you want in there. There's really no major advantage or disadvantage between the two product offerings of the storage buckets, so I'm going to give them each 1 point. Next up is cloud function. Both Supabase and Firebase offer cloud functions. They're both very easy to set up, but I will say the one downside to Supabase functions is that it is a little bit trickier to develop locally with them. The one downside to locally developing with Supabase functions is that you can only run one at a time. I'm pretty sure that the Supabase team is actively working on this issue to make sure that you can test all of your functions all at once, and I do believe that there is one workaround to test all of your functions at once, but it's not officially supported out of the box by Supabase. So overall, Supabase functions and Firebase functions, they're both pretty similar, but I will say I'm going to give a slight edge to Firebase functions in this case, simply for the local development experience. Next up is pricing. Which one is more expensive? This really does depend. Also, quick pause in the video, but if you are enjoying this video up until now and you're finding it informative, definitely feel free to hit that like button. And you know what? While you're at it, why don't you give your boy the subscribe? There are certain things that are cheaper on Firebase compared to Supabase, and there are certain things that are cheaper on Supabase compared to Firebase. For example, Firebase offers free unlimited authentications for users, whereas Supabase only offers 50,000 monthly active users for free. But Supabase does not charge you on read and write requests and simply charges you on the data transferred, whereas Firebase Firebase does charge you on the read and write request, so that can get pretty expensive if you're doing a lot of read and write operations. With pricing, it's hard to say one is a clear winner, so I'm gonna give each of them 1 point because really it depends on your situation. Some other miscellaneous things to consider is the fact that Supabase is built on completely open source technology, so you don't actually have to pay for their service. You can host everything in a Docker image and then host it on your cloud provider of choice. Whereas with Google, you are completely going to be locked into the Google Cloud Platform and you're going to get locked into that Google ecosystem. Another thing to consider is the fact that Supabase is definitely still a startup, and there are always risks about building anything on a startup technology because one day they might go out of business and then your app is not running on anything anymore, and you definitely don't want that to happen. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, I've heard that they're doing very, very well, so I don't think that's something you should be afraid of, but it is something to keep in mind. And then in terms of other client library support, if you're looking for your one-stop solution to support your mobile apps as well as your Unity games as well as your web application, Firebase is going to be the definite winner here because they support Android, iOS, web, and I believe Unity as well. Whereas Supabase officially only supports JavaScript, so it's typically going to be a web application or a React Native mobile application. But if you're trying to do some native development with Kotlin or Swift or Unity development, you probably aren't going to be wanting to use Supabase anytime soon. For my new startup that I'm building right now, I actually decided to go with Supabase. My number one rationale for this is that I really wanted to use a relational database. So I really wanted to use the Postgres database that Supabase is built on compared to the very proprietary NoSQL database that Firebase is built on. All right, well, that's Supabase versus Firebase.